Ayan called this practice cocooning, where otherwise less doctrinaire Muslims from various countries, first-generation immigrants, will come over to the West for mercantile economic reasons, seeking a better life, as we might say, and will settle and will pay their taxes and obey the law. Of course, we know that immigrants from that part of the world usually are net taxpayer contributors, according to data from Denmark and the Netherlands. They're usually a net cost to the state, but unfortunately, by the by. But what happens is, in contrast to the Western materialistic liberal society that is around them, that presents them with opportunities for temptation, according to the Islamic faith, they would call this fitna, and the entire purpose of the internal spiritual struggle is to reject temptation and lead a morally pure life. They end up insulating themselves in sectarian, ethnic and religious enclaves. They disengage from state courts and the state school system, and they essentially double down on doctrinaire Islamic practices in the Salafist school of Islam, which is living as closely as you can according to the 7th century life led by the Prophet Muhammad as the perfect man practicing the final revelation. And so that's why you see an increased use of things like the niqab or the burqa in certain areas like Whitechapel. This is why you see rates of honor-based violence and female genital mutilation skyrocketing in British cities, even though it isn't present in countries like Saudi Arabia and the Emiratis, who have cracked down on that sort of thing because they want to liberalize and commercialize and open themselves up to the world. And then when Ed Hussein toured the mosques in Britain, he found two alarming things. He went to Manchester in one case and spoke to a member of Manchester City Council there who himself was a Muslim, and he was saying that the mosques are being dominated by first and second generation refugees, people like the Abedi brothers, who committed the atrocious Manchester Arena bombing in 2017, who had, as teenagers, had fought Colonel Gaddafi as a group of jihadists in Libya. Their family had only fled Libya because they had an internal dispute with the Gaddafi regime. They weren't the best, considering they spent their housing benefit money on the nail bomb that killed and maimed many people in Manchester. And there are lots of these sons and first-generation refugees from Libya, Syria, Palestine, even Pakistan, Iraq, who are radicalizing the other members of the congregation because they have seen war, they have seen conflict, and so it is second nature to them to wage jihad in the way that the Quran would say, being mujahideen, being physical fighters, distrusting and even in some cases killing non-believers, Christians and Jews. And the other alarming thing was Ed spoke to a imam in Bradford who has been upheld as a ambassador of integration, as the acceptable face of British Islam, and he had received plenty of criticism from the broader Muslim community saying you're basically a government stooge. And Ed had spoken to him, and this Muslim ambassador refused to preach against the atrocious grooming Pakistani rape gang scandal in his mosque because he said, well, this is the fault of the white girls for drinking and for dressing immodestly because that is not according to Muslim law. And when pressed, he had said by Ed, who had said, well, if you don't engage with the state, if you don't engage with the British public and make amends on these particular issues, aren't they going to become more hostile to Islam and demand you leave? And he said, well, see it from my position. The younger members of my congregation come to me and they say, Imam, when is the caliphate coming? And I tell them, well, just bide your time, study your scripture, get jobs that are important in the offices of state, and eventually patiently wait and the caliphate will come. So it gives you cause for pessimism when even the non-violent, apparently acceptable, integrated, government-sponsored imams are telling their fellow Muslims, themselves more moderate, like Ed Hussein, that eventually, if we just patiently wait, there will be a revolutionary theocratic overthrow of the Christian parliamentary democracy of Britain to establish a 7th century caliphate. So I frankly, John, I know people want to split hairs between Islam and Islamists. They want to say that there's a peaceful, law-abiding majority and just a fringe minority of radicals. I don't see how if you input the software of Islam into the hardware of Christian Britain, you get the same civilization at the end of it. And yet again, gives me a lot of cause for pessimism.